His brothers took over the family business, until the bank revealed who truly owned it. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I never thought I'd feel so powerless in my own family. Growing up, I watched Dad build our construction company from scratch. I spent hours helping out, learning every detail, and dreaming about one day running it with him. But when he started slowing down, everything changed. My older brothers, Jason and Kyle, seemed to have taken over the moment Dad's health started declining. They smiled at me, pretending they cared, but it was all an act. Behind closed doors, they were making decisions without me, spending money carelessly, and making deals that I knew could ruin everything Dad worked so hard for. I remember the day it hit me the hardest. I walked into the office to check on a project and found Jason bragging about a new contract they had signed without even telling me. Kyle laughed along with him, and I could feel the anger building inside me. I tried to speak up, tried to remind them that Dad always wanted this to be a family effort, but they just ignored me. It wasn't just business, they were trying to push me out completely, pretending I didn't exist. I felt betrayed. Not just by them, but by the situation I couldn't control. I had trusted my brothers to act with integrity, to honor Dad's hard work, and instead, they were using their charm and words to convince Dad to give them everything. It was as if all my years of dedication didn't matter. I had to sit back and watch as they made reckless decisions, risking everything the family had built. Every time I saw them laughing over a deal or celebrating a new project, a part of me felt crushed. But deep down, I knew something they didn't. Dad had never fully signed over the ownership papers. On paper, it looked like the company was theirs, but legally, it wasn't. I had discovered it accidentally while going through old files in Dad's office, and I had kept it a secret, knowing the right time would come. The thought of finally having a chance to claim what was rightfully mine gave me hope, even as I played the part of the powerless youngest brother. I couldn't let them know I had this advantage. For now, I had to endure their arrogance, their selfishness, and their reckless behavior. I had to appear small while quietly preparing for the moment when everything would turn in my favor. Watching them make mistake after mistake, I realized that revenge wasn't about anger, it was about patience, planning, and justice. And I was ready to see it through, no matter how long it took. It was painful, but also strangely empowering. I knew the bank would eventually reveal the truth, and when it did, the people who had taken everything from me would finally see that I had never been powerless at all. It wasn't long before I discovered just how deep my brother's betrayal went. While going through some company accounts, I noticed discrepancies, money missing, invoices that didn't add up, and payments that didn't make sense. At first, I hoped it was just a mistake, but the more I looked, the clearer it became. Jason and Kyle were embezzling funds, siphoning money for their own gain while pretending everything was normal. My stomach sank as the truth hit me. A close family friend, Mr. Henderson, noticed my stress one evening. He pulled me aside and said quietly, "Ethan, they'll ruin everything Dad built if you don't do something. I've seen this happen before." His words shook me. It wasn't just about the money, it was about everything Dad had worked for, every late night, every sacrifice. Watching it being thrown away by my own brothers felt like a knife to the heart. Soon after, Jason and Kyle approached me with what they claimed was a generous offer. They wanted to buy me out of the company for a small fraction of its value. They smiled and said it was only to make things easier, to avoid family conflict. But I saw through the act immediately. It was manipulation, a way to make me leave quietly so they could continue their reckless spending without interference. The betrayal crushed me. I had spent my whole life believing in them, believing that family meant loyalty. I remembered being a kid, sitting around the dinner table, listening to Jason promise that we would always stick together no matter what. Kyle had once told me I was part of the team and that we would always protect each other. Those memories, once comforting, now burned with bitterness. How could the brothers I trusted most turn out to be so selfish and deceitful? I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, but another part knew that reacting too soon could ruin my chance at taking back what was rightfully mine. Instead, I held my emotions close, pretending to consider their offer while planning my next steps. Every interaction with them reminded me of the gap between who they had promised to be and who they really were. As days passed, I realized the betrayal was more than just financial, it was personal. It was a violation of trust, of shared history, and of the family bond we were supposed to have. Their greed wasn't just hurting the business, it was trying to erase my place in it, my identity, and the legacy Dad had left us. I promised myself I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't allow their lies and manipulation to define the company or my family. I had to stay strong, patient, and clever. The right moment to act would come, and when it did, they would see that the youngest brother they had underestimated was still in control, in ways they could never imagine. I knew I couldn't confront Jason and Kyle openly yet. If I did, they would cover their tracks, and all my efforts would be wasted. So I started documenting everything quietly, every transaction that didn't add up, every check that was signed suspiciously, every expense that made no sense. I created files, took notes, and stored copies in a hidden folder on my laptop. Every small detail mattered because I needed proof that couldn't be ignored. At the same time, I reached out to a lawyer I trusted, Maya Thompson, discreetly. I explained the situation without revealing everything at once. She promised to investigate quietly and guide me through the legal maze. It was reassuring to have someone professional on my side, someone who could look at the documents objectively and find the weaknesses in my brother's actions. While I worked on this, I found myself thinking back to all the years I had poured into the business. I remembered the late nights I spent reviewing contracts, helping with projects, and even stepping in when mistakes happened. I had never asked for recognition or reward, I just wanted to honor what Dad had built. Seeing Jason and Kyle treat it carelessly stung more than anything. The sacrifices I made, the patience I showed, it all felt like it had been taken for granted. Then, one evening, while going through old family trust documents, I discovered something I hadn't noticed before. There was a clause, hidden in plain sight, that gave me rights I never knew I had. It wasn't obvious, and my brothers had never checked it because they assumed I had no claim. My heart raced as I realized this loophole could be the key to reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Even with this discovery, I wrestled with my emotions. Part of me wanted revenge, to expose them, humiliate them, and show them that I had always been the one who truly deserved control. But another part of me wondered if I could find a way to resolve this without destroying the family completely. Could I act with justice instead of anger? Could I reclaim the company while keeping my dignity intact? The conflict inside me was exhausting. I felt the weight of years of betrayal pressing down, yet I also knew that acting rashly could ruin everything I had worked for. I needed patience, focus, and careful planning. My brothers thought they had won, but they didn't know that I had the tools, the proof, and the knowledge to turn the tables. Every day, I reminded myself that strength wasn't always loud or immediate. Sometimes it was quiet, careful, and hidden, waiting for the right moment. And I was ready to use every bit of that strength to protect what was mine, to honor my father's legacy, and to finally face the betrayal with the clarity and precision it deserved. The path ahead would be difficult, but I knew I wasn't powerless anymore. The moment finally came when I couldn't wait any longer. I called Jason and Kyle into the office under the pretense of a routine meeting. I laid out everything I had collected, bank statements, invoices, and records of missing funds. My hands were steady, even though my heart was pounding. I wanted them to see the truth, to realize that their actions had consequences. Instead of reacting with fear or remorse, they laughed. Jason smirked and said, "You really think this changes anything? You don't have any real power here." Kyle leaned back in his chair, shaking his head, as if I were a child making a fuss. Their arrogance hit me like a punch to the chest, but I refused to let it shake me. As I stared at them, I couldn't help but think back to Dad. I remembered sitting on his lap as a kid while he explained what it meant to be honest and patient. "Strength isn't about yelling or forcing people," he had said. "It's about waiting for the right moment and standing firm when it matters most." Those lessons were more than words, they were my guide now. I felt him with me, steadying my nerves, giving me the courage to face the very brothers who had betrayed me. They started threatening legal action, waving papers and contracts as if that would intimidate me. But I stayed calm. I didn't reveal the loophole I had found in the family trust. I didn't need to. They believed they controlled everything, but the truth was hidden, and it was in my hands. Their confidence made me even more determined. I realized how easy it would be to turn the tables without them ever expecting it. I noticed something different in myself as I watched their expressions. I wasn't the powerless youngest brother anymore. I wasn't trembling or pleading, and I wasn't afraid of their threats. I was quiet, steady, and focused. Every sarcastic comment they made, every sneer, only reinforced my resolve. The betrayal had hurt me deeply, but it had also made me stronger, sharper, and more patient. For the first time, I felt the shift in our dynamic. I had been underestimated for years, and now, even without revealing my secret, I could see the cracks forming in their confidence. Their laughter no longer intimidated me. Their threats no longer controlled me. I had the proof, I had the law on my side, and most importantly, I had the patience to wait for the right moment to act. By the time the meeting ended, I had made my point without saying much. I left the room with a calm smile, hiding the weight of my knowledge and the plans forming in my mind. Ethan Walker, the youngest brother, wasn't powerless anymore. He was quietly determined, ready to reclaim what was rightfully his and finally bring justice to the betrayal that had haunted him for so long. I knew I couldn't take on Jason and Kyle alone, so I reached out to Maya Thompson, my childhood friend who had become a skilled lawyer. We had grown up together, sharing secrets and dreams, and I trusted her more than anyone outside my family. When I explained the situation, she didn't hesitate. She agreed to help me investigate everything quietly and legally, keeping our plan hidden from my brothers. Maya and I spent hours going through old company documents, contracts, and emails. It didn't take long for us to uncover clear evidence of wrongdoing. There were forged signatures, hidden clauses, and financial manipulations that Jason and Kyle had carefully tried to cover up. Each discovery sent a mix of anger and satisfaction through me. Anger because of the betrayal, and satisfaction because I finally had proof strong enough to challenge them. Even with Maya's help, I found it hard to trust fully. I had been deceived by my own brothers, people I had relied on for years. Letting someone else into the situation, even someone I trusted, felt risky. I was constantly worried about leaks or mistakes that could ruin everything. But Maya's calm and methodical approach helped ease my fears. I realized that strategy and patience were more important than acting out of anger. As we dug deeper, a clear plan began to form. Using the bank and the legal loophole I had discovered in the family trust, I could reclaim my rights without giving them a chance to fight back effectively. The more I mapped out the steps, the more I understood that I had the advantage my brothers never suspected. They thought they were in control, but I had been preparing quietly, collecting evidence, and waiting for the perfect moment. The tension between my desire for revenge and the need for careful planning kept growing. I wanted them to feel the shock of realization, but I also knew that rushing could destroy everything I had worked for. Every decision had to be calculated. Maya reminded me that justice was about timing as much as evidence. Her presence gave me confidence and focus, but also a sense of accountability. By the end of our investigation, we had everything we needed. The forged signatures, the hidden documents, and the evidence of financial misconduct, all lined up to support my claim. I could feel the moment approaching when I would finally confront my brothers with the full weight of the truth. They wouldn't see it coming, their arrogance had blinded them. I realized something important: allies were not just people who help you, they were people who see the truth and stand with you quietly. Maya was that person for me. Together, we had built a plan strong enough to undo years of betrayal. And as I prepared for the next step, I felt a new kind of confidence. The brothers who had tried to take everything from me were about to face consequences they never imagined, and I was ready. Using the documents and loophole Maya helped me uncover, I took my first real step toward taking back what was mine. We met with the bank privately, showing them proof of ownership and the forged documents Jason and Kyle had used. The bank manager reviewed everything carefully, and within days, I gained control of the company's main accounts. It was quiet, legal, and completely unexpected. No loud confrontation, just a silent shift of power. The change hit my brothers like a storm. Payments they scheduled were suddenly declined, investments halted mid-process, and suppliers began calling non-stop, confused and worried. I didn't say a word. I waited, watching from a distance as they scrambled for explanations. Their confident smiles faded fast, replaced with panic as reality sank in. One afternoon, I walked into the office and found Jason sitting alone, his hands in his hair, eyes red and swollen. Papers were scattered across the desk, and he looked like a man watching his world fall apart. I had seen him angry, arrogant, even smug, but never broken. Kyle wasn't there. I later learned he had gone home, refusing to return, too ashamed or too frightened to face whatever was happening. Seeing Jason like that stirred emotions I didn't expect. A part of me felt satisfaction. For once, he felt what he had made me feel, small, cornered, powerless. But another part of me felt something deeper. This wasn't just about taking their money or control. It was about justice. My father's legacy deserved better than theft and manipulation. The employees, the clients, the family name, they all deserved honesty. Revenge alone felt shallow, but justice gave me purpose. Jason finally looked up at me and asked, voice shaking, "Did you do this, Ethan? Did you freeze the accounts?" There was fear in his tone, but also something like realization. He was beginning to understand that I wasn't the weak younger brother he thought I was. I didn't answer directly. I simply told him the truth: actions have consequences. His face fell, and he looked away, unable to speak. I left the office feeling a strange mix of victory and sorrow. I had taken my first step, and it worked. But it also showed me how much damage betrayal could do, not just to a business, but to a family. I wanted justice, not destruction, but I knew I couldn't stop now. Not when the truth was so close to being fully revealed. As the days passed, Jason and Kyle tried everything to regain control, calling the bank, reaching out to lawyers, even trying to schedule emergency meetings. But they were blocked at every turn, confused and desperate. They still had no idea about the loophole in the trust or the full extent of the evidence I held. The suspense grew thicker. Would they recover before I made my final move? Could they somehow find a way to fight back? Or would my next step end everything they thought they owned? The game had shifted, and for the first time, they were the ones standing in the dark, while I held the light. The chaos in the company quickly spilled into the family. Dad, who had always been the steady center of our lives, fell ill from the stress. He spent sleepless nights worrying about what had happened, checking in on the business constantly, and asking questions that Jason and Kyle couldn't answer. Seeing him like that hit me harder than anything else. The betrayal, the greed, and the chaos were hurting the person I loved most. Meanwhile, my brothers began turning on each other. Jason blamed Kyle for every misstep, and Kyle fired back with accusations of his own. Meetings that used to be full of confident decisions turned into shouting matches and finger-pointing. I watched quietly, holding back a quiet satisfaction, but I also felt a pang of sadness. This wasn't just business collapsing, it was the family I had grown up with unraveling before my eyes. Amid the tension, memories of my childhood came flooding back. I remembered the countless times Dad had praised me for small victories in the business, staying late to double-check calculations, helping with construction plans, and showing initiative when the older brothers didn't care. He had told me I had the patience and determination to succeed, even when others doubted me. Those memories reminded me why I was fighting, but they also made the present pain sharper. Maya cautioned me to move carefully. "One wrong step, Ethan," she said, "and everything you've worked for could be lost. They'll try to trap you, twist the law, or turn people against you. Don't underestimate them, even now." Her words made me pause and think. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about strategy, timing, and protecting what was rightfully mine without causing unnecessary damage. Even as I planned my next steps, I began to understand something important. Revenge alone didn't feel as satisfying as I had imagined. Watching Jason and Kyle panic gave a momentary thrill, but without rightful closure, it felt hollow. The real victory wasn't about seeing them suffer, it was about restoring justice, reclaiming the business, and honoring Dad's legacy. Only then would the weight of the betrayal feel balanced by the satisfaction of doing what was right. I realized that I needed more than just patience, I needed empathy, restraint, and focus. The emotions of betrayal, anger, and sadness were strong, but acting purely out of them could ruin everything. My father's health, the employees depending on the company, and the long-term future of the business all mattered. I had to act with precision, not just passion. As I observed the fallout, I felt a strange mix of emotions, pride in my preparation, sadness for the family torn apart, and determination to see this through properly. The path ahead required careful steps, but I knew the next move could finally bring the closure I had been waiting for. Revenge without justice wasn't enough, and I was determined to make sure justice came first. The moment of truth arrived when I walked into the bank with all the evidence neatly organized. I presented the documents proving that I was the rightful owner of the company, the original trust papers, proof of forged signatures, and financial records showing the brothers' misconduct. The bank officials studied everything carefully, double-checking every detail. I could feel my heart beating faster, but I stayed calm, knowing that this was the turning point. Within hours, the bank froze all transactions controlled by Jason and Kyle. They could no longer access accounts, make payments, or move investments. It was silent, but the effect was immediate. Phone calls flooded the office, their confusion growing with every declined payment. I watched from a distance as panic replaced arrogance. For once, they were powerless, just as I had felt for so many years. When Jason and Kyle learned what had happened, their shock was palpable. They stared at me in disbelief, as if I had performed some impossible feat. Kyle refused to meet my eyes, hiding his fear behind a mask of anger, while Jason kept asking the same question over and over, How is this possible? They didn't understand that I had planned every step carefully, quietly preparing while they assumed they had won. The freeze forced them to the negotiation table. Suddenly, they had to talk to me, listen to my terms, and consider options they had never imagined. The arrogance that had guided them for years was gone, replaced by uncertainty and desperation. For the first time, I had the leverage. I could decide how this would end, and for the first time, the power was in my hands. As the legal battle loomed, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led me here. Years of being dismissed, ignored, and underestimated had shaped me. The betrayal I had endured, the careful documentation, and the patient planning, it all mattered now. I realized that each moment of doubt and frustration had strengthened me, made me sharper, and prepared me for this very day. I also thought about my father, about the lessons he had taught me about integrity, patience, and resilience. I felt a mix of pride and sadness, pride in knowing I had stayed true to those lessons, and sadness for the family rift that had formed. But I understood that strength wasn't just about holding power, it was about acting with justice and purpose, even when emotions ran high. The brothers' panic, the frozen accounts, and the negotiations all felt surreal. I had finally turned the tables, but it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, protecting the company, and proving that patience and careful planning could overcome greed and betrayal. As I left the bank that day, I felt a sense of clarity and strength I hadn't known before. Years of being underestimated, overlooked, and hurt had forged me into someone capable of facing any challenge. The path ahead was still difficult, but for the first time, I knew I could handle it. I was stronger than I ever thought possible, and nothing could shake the foundation I had quietly rebuilt. The court's decision finally came, and it was everything I had hoped for. The judge ruled completely in my favor, confirming that I was the rightful owner of the company. Jason and Kyle lost all control, their attempts to fight back crumbling under the weight of evidence we had gathered. It was a quiet moment in the courtroom, but for me, it felt like the loudest victory I had ever experienced. Taking control of the company wasn't just about power, it was about restoring what Dad had built and fixing the damage my brothers had caused. I immediately began reinstating honest management, reviewing projects carefully, and making sure employees felt secure again. Many of them had been anxious, unsure of the company's future, but seeing me step in with clarity and fairness restored their trust. I wanted the business to thrive, and I knew that would only happen if everyone felt respected and valued. Watching Jason and Kyle leave the courthouse was surreal. They were humbled and broken, their arrogance completely stripped away. Jason avoided eye contact, his face pale and tense, while Kyle walked stiffly, refusing to speak. For years, they had believed they were untouchable, and now they were facing the consequences of their greed. I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. I had won, but it was sad to see family torn apart by their own choices. After everything settled, I visited Dad. He was quiet at first, but then he looked at me with a small, proud smile. "You were always meant to run it right," he said softly. Those words meant more to me than the courtroom victory. It wasn't just about reclaiming the company, it was about honoring my father's vision, his hard work, and his lessons about patience, integrity, and resilience. I reflected on everything that had led to this moment, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the careful planning, and the emotional struggle. Each challenge had tested me, but it had also strengthened me. I realized that patience, integrity, and courage were far more powerful than greed, arrogance, or betrayal. My brothers had learned this the hard way, and I had learned it by staying true to myself. The company began to flourish again under honest leadership. Employees felt valued, projects moved forward smoothly, and the trust that had been broken slowly returned. I knew there were still challenges ahead, but I also knew that with careful planning, determination, and honesty, we could overcome anything. Looking back, I understood the deeper lesson. Revenge without purpose feels empty, but justice guided by patience and integrity creates lasting change. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and betrayed, yet I had turned it all into strength. The journey had been painful, but it had proven that doing what is right, even quietly and carefully, can overcome even the deepest betrayal. For the first time in years, I felt complete peace. The company was safe, Dad was proud, and I had reclaimed not just control, but dignity and honor. Patience, courage, and integrity had won, and nothing could take that away. Once I had full control of the company, I focused on more than just profits. I wanted to rebuild the culture, the values, and the trust that Dad had always emphasized. I encouraged honesty, transparency, and respect among employees. Every decision I made was guided by his vision, and I dedicated each step of the company's success to the lessons he had taught me. I wanted the business to reflect his integrity and the hard work that had built it from the ground up. I often thought about the brothers and the choices that had brought us here. I didn't take revenge to hurt them or humiliate them. My goal was simple: to reclaim what was rightfully mine, to protect the company, and to honor my father's legacy. Seeing them lose control was never about cruelty, it was about justice. That clarity gave me peace I hadn't felt during all the tension and plotting. Jason and Kyle tried to reach out afterward, attempting reconciliation. They apologized, expressed regret, and even offered to help in some way. But I remained cautious. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, and forgiveness isn't given lightly. I listened, acknowledged their words, but I kept my distance. I wanted to see true change and accountability before I considered letting the past go completely. Their attempts at reconciliation were a reminder that while people can seek forgiveness, it must be earned through consistent actions over time. Despite the challenges, I began to feel a sense of closure. The company was stabilizing, employees were motivated, and the projects Dad had started were moving forward successfully. I realized that the betrayal, the pain, and the struggle had all shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I had learned that patience, careful planning, and staying true to one's values could overcome even the deepest treachery. One evening, I stood by the large window in my office and looked out at the city skyline. The lights twinkled, reflecting the energy and life of the world beyond the office walls. I felt proud, content, and at peace. The battles of the past were behind me, and the company was thriving in the hands of someone who truly cared. I had endured betrayal, but I had emerged stronger, guided by justice and integrity. In the end, I understood the most important lesson: betrayal can break hearts, shake confidence, and disrupt lives, but resilience, patience, and justice can rebuild everything. I had turned pain into strength, deception into clarity, and loss into an opportunity to honor what was right. Dad's legacy was safe, the company was thriving, and I had proven to myself that staying true to one's values was the most powerful form of revenge. As I watched the city below, I felt complete. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led to growth, closure, and a deep understanding of what truly mattered. I knew the future was bright, and I was ready to face it with strength, wisdom, and integrity.